So I just got asked how good Clutch would be at doing programmatic SEO. And the person had a spreadsheet. And in the spreadsheet, they had a list of services. And then they had a list of cities. And they wanted a website that had every service with every city. And we spent a couple of hours doing this because we did it live and we vibe coded it with an AI. But this was the end result. Here you have every city times every service, and it's all being powered by a Google Sheet. I know that this city isn't there, but we'll go ahead and add my hometown of Houston. This is the coolest town. And you updated the Google Sheet. And here it is. It's that fast. It's instantaneous. How cool is that? And the next thing is, not only did we wire it up to where this thing is powered by 2 Google Sheets, I can click through and I can land on water damage restoration / Houston. So I didn't spend any time whatsoever on the design of this. I just quickly built this as a demo, but I am going to show you now how we pulled this off. So to do this, I'm going to start a brand new project and we're going to run through all the steps that we did to create this. I hope you're excited about this. You can create some really cool programmatic SEO. And in this demo, we're not even going to be using WordPress. We're just going to power the site purely based off of a Google Sheet, using a Google Sheet as our CMS. And let's get to it. So from the top, we'll just create a brand new project and we'll call this Google Sheet CMS, and we'll create a new project. And we'll end up with a home screen, and we're going to use this to be our index. And then we're going to have a second page, which represents our cities times the services, so cities and services. So the very first thing we could do is we could come in and say, we don't even need WordPress. So we could actually remove this. And you can see the WordPress logo disappears. The WordPress library disappears. Just lightens things up a little bit because we're not even going to use WordPress. We're going to power this sucker with a Google Sheet. And you're probably thinking, how are we going to get Google Sheet data on here? And we'll come here and we'll hit new query, and you're going to notice that we don't even have the WordPress queries anymore. So to do that, we're going to click create on this project. And that's going to give us a file with a placeholder query. And this is helpful because it gives our AI something to work with. So we'll make this a little bigger and we'll hit open chat and we'll put our AI into edit mode and we're going to ask it some questions. So the next thing that I did here is I looked on Google to see if there was a library to parse Google Sheets that's just on NPM. And through a little bit of Googling, I found public Google Sheets parser. And that's exactly what it does. You could go look this up on NPM. So if we go over here, here it is, public Google Sheets parser, published a year ago. It's written in TypeScript. It's a nice little library. So when you read this, it just says you need to take your Google Sheet and make it public. So to do that, you click share. You put this on anyone with the link. Once you do this, your Google Sheet is public and can now be accessed by this library. So make sure you don't skip this step. Name your tabs. We'll go over why that's important later. Make a header column. This is required for the data that gets returned. And then fill out your sheet. That's it. So we have services, we have cities. And now we should write our code. But the first thing you'll see here is it says, hey, you don't have this library installed. No problem. We'll go to Clutch, add NPM library, get public Google Sheets parser, and come back over here. And in a second, that disappears because it notices that we do now, in fact, have that library installed, and we're now ready to use it. And so let's come down here and we'll actually prompt our way to getting these two functions. So what we're going to need is a function that accepts a spreadsheet ID and a sheet name, since our sheets have names at the bottom, because we're going to want to get services and cities separately. Please give me a function. I'm nice to my AI. Please give me a function that uses public Google Sheets parser to fetch the data from a Google Sheet. I would like an optional sheet name parameter. I think that's all that we need. Let's just try. Let's see what it comes up with. Get Google Sheet data. It accepts a sheet ID and a sheet name and returns it. And the interesting thing is, this is close, but this is where sometimes you're going to have to. Actually, I'm going to do something we should have done. Yes. This is a trick because it wrote close code, but it wasn't quite correct. We're going to do this. Fetch. And we're going to pass the page in. And what this will do is it'll tell the AI to go fetch this information and use this information whenever it tries to write this, because it's going to need that to read the documentation to write the function for you properly. Okay. And it could be that I'm operating on GPT-4, and I don't know, but I'm going to give you all the secret here. The issue is if you look up a sheet name, it needs to be in an object, and it's not putting it in an object. It's an easy fix. I hate that it didn't just get this one right off the bat, but this just needs to be in an object like that. That's it. You can tell that because it's in an object here, and when it passes into Google Sheets parser, options is an object. So with that, we should be able to fetch this Google Sheet by its ID and its name, and we almost totally vibe coded this. You would have had one little issue. Probably if you re-rolled it a few times, it would have figured it out. But let's go back to our page. And here on our page, now if we go here to new query, we have get Google Sheets data. Of course, it's going to error out because we haven't given it a sheet ID. Let's go get that sheet ID. And you can get that from, it could be everything between edit and D, the URL. So we're just going to copy that into our clipboard. We're going to go back to Clutch. We're going to paste that sheet ID. And already it's working because the sheet name is optional. But we can say cities, and it'll get the second sheet. And if we put services, that's going to get the first sheet. So everything's working like that. This one little piece of code here that we coded for the most part with an AI, one little thing you probably could have spotted. It still would have worked. You'd have just been scratching your head. Why is this not working? Filtering. You probably could have re-rolled it a few times and gotten this, but you can see that the AI wrote like 99% of this code. And it shows up now, the parameters that it writes show up in the interface for you to operate with. So we have our sheet ID, we have services, and that's good enough to get our index screen done, because what we need to do is build an index screen that lists every city, and then inside of every city, every service. So let's get started on that. Inside of our children, let's add a loop with the O key. And what we're going to loop over are the cities. Let's make sure we have this thing set, because we have set to services. We need cities. All right. And I even probably want to go ahead and rename this to cities so I can identify this one from the other one. Okay. And in here, now we know that this is the cities one because they'll end up both being the same get Google Sheet data. I want to say loop over the Google Sheet data from cities. And it's 5, and that's correct because if we go to our sheet here, there are 5 cities. So that's good. So far, so good. And let's make these our H1s, like our cities, the H1s. And we'll come to our H1 and let's bind to the cities loop, and we'll bind to city. So there we go. And they even come in the order that they're defined in the spreadsheet. It's pretty cool. And I believe that for each of these cities, we have a little description of the city. So again, we'll go to our loop. Don't bind to the data because this will be individuals. We want the loop, which loops over and gives you them one at a time. And so again, you can see that Melbourne's a cool town. These are all cool towns, but Houston's the coolest town. That's where I'm from. Sorry, I'm taking it. This is Space City. Boom, we'll do it. Refresh. We'll love that. How cool is that? Use edit a spreadsheet and get your website updated. Okay, so there we have it. We have our cities, but inside of this loop, we need to now loop over and get all of our services. So we'll just insert a data. And on this one, we'll do a new query, get the Google Sheet data again. We'll go over here. We'll get our sheet ID again, everything between the D and the edit, copy the sheet ID in there. And it's optional, but I'm going to go ahead and type in services, the sheet name for that. And now what you're going to see is the data being printed out since we don't have anything inside for all of this. And let's go ahead and we'll make these H2s for these. And we also need a paragraph. And for these H2s, we will bind the text. Actually, we need one more thing. We need a loop because we need a loop over the services. So we'll grab both of these. This is cool. We're getting an opportunity to show off some of these features. You can multi-select, hold shift, and hit O. And that's going to give you a loop. This loop, let's rename this data to services. And this loop, we are going to bind to the services. So we now have 14 services times 5 cities. And we should bind these to that inner loop. Okay. Now, even though these are technically H2s on the page semantically, I want them to show up more like H4s. So we can do that because they're way too big. And let's also modify this paragraph here. Here's the descriptions. So with that, we've got Melbourne. This is a cool town. Water damage, mold damage. Sydney, water damage, mold damage. Perth, and so on and so forth. So we have 15 times 5. We have the whole page now built out. But this is just one big page built out of 2 loops looping over a spreadsheet. This gives us our nice index. But we can do more than that. We need to build all of the individual pages, and we want to do it with total SEO. And we want to do that with SEO page slugs. So we're going to build a new blank page. And on this one, let's make it where the paths are dynamic. So let's do it with, we're going to do service first, and then city second. And we'll make the default service. This is just a convenience thing. Whoops. Let's make it water. And we'll make the default city Melbourne. Now, why are we doing this? I'll show you why. Because if we leave and come back, it'll go ahead and fill those in for you. Just keeps you from having to keep going up to the top of the page and filling these in. So you don't have to use the defaults, but believe me, it makes your life easier. Because now I can leave and come back and boom, get these filled in. All right, so now we have water damage restoration Melbourne. We don't really have a data fetcher on this page. We don't have a linkage between the index page and this one. Let's start by building this one. So we need to add a data. Now, this is going to change a little bit because we're going to need a second function, because our first function that we have here that we vibe coded, what it does is it just returns the whole sheet. What we now need is to filter the sheet and return only one object based on the column and based on the value from within the column, because we want the slug column and then the value of Melbourne, but we want to return the whole object. So let's go try to prompt GPT for that. Please create a new function that can receive a column and a value and then return the entire object row that matches. Okay, let's just see if I'm tired. I'm not describing this very well, but let's just see if GPT can understand my gibberish and pull that off. So in this case, it tried to make me pass the data. I want this pulled via the Google Sheet. So the function should accept the sheet ID, should accept the similar params as get Google Sheet data, but also have the filter. All right, I'm really typing gibberish now. Okay, so it calls the top one, the sheet ID and the sheet name, and then it filters it. Yes, that one's correct. So we'll hit keep. And we actually don't want this one. So the problem with this one is it expected us to find the sheet data separately and then pass it. I don't want to call two functions. Oh, never mind. It does want both because it's going to use this one to call this one. Okay, so now we've got our new function. And what we've got is get Google Sheet data. We have get filtered Google Sheet data. And this one is now a sheet ID and a sheet name, but also a column and a value so it can filter. And so we'll come to our Google Sheet and we'll copy our sheet ID, paste it. And now we need let's see, the first thing we want is a service and then a city. So sheet name, service. And then we want to do a specific column. We call it slug. And then we want the value to be Melbourne. Spreadsheet ID is required. I gave it one. Now, I'm going to do something here. I'm going to cheat because I did this earlier. Okay. And this is what it probably should have done here. So it's saying, hey, this doesn't exist, of course. Get filtered sheet data. Whoops. Go back to our Google Sheet. We want that. We want the column to be slug. We want the olds to Houston. And we want the sheet name to be services. Okay, so we've got our function. And now what we need to do is do the service first. So we want slug. The service we want to do is water damage restoration. And we want this to be services. And sure enough, we got the data here. And so what we'll do is we'll put an H1 and a paragraph here, the H1. And I did that by hitting the number 1 key on my keyboard and then P for paragraph. And from here, we can get the service. And here we can get the description. And now that we have that, we want to make it to where this value pulls in dynamically. So we'll pull that in from the params and we'll pull that in from service. So if you remember when we defined the page here, we defined service, city in these brackets, that actually puts them into params that we can then use on our queries. So we have this now powering this query. And what's so neat about this is we can go get a different service like mold remediation. We can try this. And sure enough, it works. The URL is now powering the query on the page, which is powering the text on the page. So we have half of it done. We should wire up the city. And that should be pretty easy. So we'll just duplicate this. And in this case, we're not doing a loop because it's not like a list of data, but it's just data inside of data. Okay, I don't know, there's a little glitch there, a couple of refreshes, but we're back cooking. So on this inner one, we want to make it to where it's doing cities tab, and we want to pull from city. So we just change that query, and then that one's working, but this one needs to be bound differently. So now we have our page, and on this page, we have our service and the town that it's in, and you could take care of making this page better and more well-designed. That's not what we're here today to talk about. But now how do I link all of these to all of these? And that's actually pretty easy to do. We'll come to our Melbourne water damage restoration, and we'll hold shift and we'll hit L to add a link around it. And so that's done. And we'll go to our path and we'll say we want it to go page, service, city. Whenever we do that, we're going to get 2 variables to bind. So we want to bind this to the loop that's giving us services. Perfect. Right one on the first try. So here it is. So fill that in with that slug. And the city, we'll go to the second loop. We'll go to the city slug. So look at that. Water damage restoration, Melbourne. If I click on another one, Sydney mold remediation, for example, we can check it. Sydney mold remediation. So now I can click anything. We'll go to perf, old inspection perf, and we're pulling everything from the Google Sheet. In less than 30 minutes, I don't know how many minutes this video is ultimately going to take once it's edited, but in not very long, we now have generated a site that you can power with a Google Sheet. And it's very powerful because you can edit the Google Sheet and this website edits live. And what's so powerful about this is think about the SEO implications. We can easily just come into our cities and add number 6, Dallas. It's wannabe Los Angeles inside Texas. And we can now go back to our homepage and we now have Dallas and we have Dallas fault remediation. We just created like 14 more pages that quick in our site through this. So this Google Sheet powered site concept is really awesome. And of course you can mix this with WordPress. If we wouldn't have uninstalled the WordPress library, you could do both. You could have some of your pages powered by a Google Sheet. You could have some powered by WordPress. You can do whatever you want. And the magic of all of this were just these 2 pretty simple functions that you can code with an AI. So that's it. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. I know that I have a lot more videos to create for y'all. Definitely subscribe to the channel and join our Discord so that you can make requests like these. And I'll try to be recording at least 1 video a day from now on to share with all of you. All right. Thank you so much. See y'all in the next one.